Davies and welcome to Thanet Writers investigates 50 years of nursing. When writing historical pieces, finding factually accurate content amongst a plethora of false information can prove difficult. For many years, the knowledge of nursing in the 1950s comes from films such as Carry On Nursing. Today I have come to speak to Zoe Davies, who was a nurse for 50 years, to find out the truth, and just how accurate those Carry On films really were. Hello Jill, and thank you for speaking to us today. So did you always want to be a nurse?
No, it came to me when I was 12, when I had a bad accident, and I spent 6 months in hospital, and I watched the nurses, I helped the nurses, and I found it great fun, and that was when I decided this is the job for me.
Mm-hmm. And how did you actually get into it then?
Well, I applied at the time when I left school, I wasn't old enough, and then I stayed in the job that I was in, and then I applied when I was in my early 20s.
So we've all sort of learned from Carry On films what nursing was like in the 50s. How does it actually compare?
Not at all. I think Carry On films are about as far removed as you could get from nursing in those days. I can't say what happens these days, of course. No, it wasn't as you thought, kissing in the cupboards and all this, that and the other with the doctors. In fact, in my set, at the first hospital I was at, we did actually have one girl left because it wasn't like Dr. Kildare. Dr. Kildare was a very popular hospital programme that was on at that time, and she joined because she thought it was going to be kissing in the linen cupboard and going out with all the doctors. In actual fact, the doctors really had nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm. So is Matron a myth, or did she actually exist?
Matron was the one. I think hospitals started to deteriorate when you took away Matron. She was the sort of matriarch of the whole place. Everybody respected her. She knew everybody's name. You couldn't get away with anything. She'd glide down the corridor like a ship in full sail, and you respected her. But if you had problems, she was your greatest friend, and she then became a mother hen and did everything she could to help you. Bring back Matron, I say, because I think that's the way forward.
Mm-hmm. So was it always serious, or I bet you had some fun on the wards as well?
No, it was hard work, it was long, you got very tired, but you did have fun. I know my first ward out of training school, it was drummed into us, after lunch you had bedpan round, and I was on a ladies' ward, elderly ladies' ward at that time, and so you shut the ward with a thing across the screen across the door, and you let no one in, no one. Sister and I were the only two on, and Sister went to lunch and left me doing the bedpan round. We had some great machine that warmed up, that you plugged into the walls, because we had metal bedpans, and you never gave those to a patient cold. So they were all warmed up, and you had your bedpans ready. And then I had this man who had the audacity to come round my screen. So I had to go down, put him out the door, say, no, sorry. And he said, but, no, sorry, I'm doing the bedpan round. You'll have to sit on that chair. And I sat him on a hard chair outside of the door, left him there, carried on with my bedpans. Anyway, he and Sister came back when she came back from lunch, laughing their heads off round the screen. He was the geriatric consultant, and I'd put him out, and he'd had to sit in the corridor while I did my bedpans. But it was all laughed off, you know, that sort of thing. And another thing I had one day was I thought I was going to be in trouble because somebody dropped their glasses case, and I crawled down on the floor and thought, well, I'd crawl out the other end of the bed for something different, you know. So I crawled out the other end of the bed, only to meet with these legs. And the minute I saw these shoes and these legs, I knew it was Matron's feet. So I just sort of crawled out, afternoon, nurse, and got up, gave the thing to the patient and run like mad to get out of the ward before I got told off. you know, all these sort of things. They made that little break in the seriousness of it all. But no, generally with your patients, you kept and maintained a happy atmosphere, because, as we were taught, they were the only people that you see. If they didn't have visitors, yours was the face. So if you're going to walk about with a long face and be bad-tempered all day, that just wasn't fair.
So I read somewhere that you actually all lived in when you were training.
Yes, we all lived in the nurses' home. These were great places. The younger ones were in one home until you got to the third year and you were in another home, so that you were all about the same age. We were under the care. She was always lovely, a home sister. She made sure that we were all kept well, had all our vaccinations up to date. But no, nurses' homes were good. The door was locked at 8 o'clock in the evening, and you had to get somebody to let you in, and you were checked that you were okay and in your bed and all this sort of thing. But we were well looked after. I mean, you know, you couldn't have wished for more.
So, talk me through an average day, if there is such a thing as an average day on the ward.
Yes, our day used to start at 7:30, and you got on and finished breakfast. In those days, not like today, where it all comes up ready on a tray and somebody other than a nurse gives you your meal. The meals were served, and the responsibility of the nurses. You had a full breakfast in those days. In fact, I think we fed our patients far too much. They had cereal, the cooked bacon and egg, sausage, whatever they wanted. Followed by toast and marmalade that you were personally responsible for going and making. And you've got 40 patients on your ward, and you've got to go out there and make 40 lots of toast. And then they had their 2 rounds of cups of tea. And every patient had what we called a fluid chart, which you were again responsible after each meal going round and filling in. That told you what the patient had drunk, so we knew how patients weren't dehydrated. So it was all much more involved. After that, you then go on with the bed making, the bed baths, and then it was time for matrons round middle of the morning, or the consultants round. So we were all told to keep busy. The ward had to be immaculate no matter how busy you'd been. Everything had to be done, beds done, patients sitting up, pillows plumped up for when matron came, wheels on the beds all facing the right direction. And we were told, keep busy. You never let matron see you not busy. So if you can't find anything to do, run up and down the wall with a bedpan covered up with your towel, because at least it looks as if you're doing something. So that's the sort of thing we did. Then it was lunchtime, so once again, you were the ones that had to dish out the lunch from our bedpan container. Then you collected it up again, fluid charts to be done, and then after lunch all the curtains were pulled and everybody had rest hour, and so they were quiet. But unlike today, where they've got open visiting, we had very select visiting. You only had an afternoon visiting, and that was for an hour on Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays. And half an hour in the evenings from 7:30 till 8 o'clock. So you did have that time, and that time was probably your busiest, because you then washed hairs. If you're on a ladies' ward, you went round, washed everybody's hair. And if you weren't doing that, you were on, especially when you were first into the ward, you were the dog's body that cleaned the sluice, shone the bedpans, your Vim and your Jif and things were your best friend, and your disinfectant. Everything always smelled of disinfectant. Those were the sort of things you did in the afternoons. And then of course it was coming up to tea time, about 4 o'clock. As I say, I think we fed them too much. 4 o'clock they had jam sandwiches and a cake that had been made by the kitchen, and so that was that. And then 2 hours later it was supper time, and up came the trolley again and dish out another great big meal. But now I think they realised that, you know, they were overfed really. They didn't need all that, they weren't doing anything. And then once you got them tidied up and down, the lights went off without fail at 10 o'clock, and the ward had to be quiet, dead quiet. No talking. Nurses had to talk in whispers. You had to whisper, and at the end of the ward you sat with your 2 little chairs with an angle poised lamp covered in a green thing so that the light didn't go out, and that was our supposed revision time for the night.
That sounds like you had a lot to do. So how many staff were on each ward?
Well, in the daytime you'd have about 4 would be your maximum, and at night time it was 2. You never had more than 2 on at night. But today's nursing is totally different. It's more technology. Nurses do what the doctors did in our day. Nursing was a basic nursing care which you learnt and had knocked into you that you could never forget it. But now nurses have to have certificates on everything they do, like doing injections, everything. They can't do things without having bits of paper, and I think this is what's half ruined the nursing, is the fact there's far too much paperwork, and things have got very technical. You've got all these machines now, so you can't really base it on like we had. Ours was just hard run. You got on and did it, and there was nothing done for you. You made everything. You sterilised your own stuff. You cleaned your own stuff, and that's how it. So it has progressed a long way, and I think not always for the better, because I think in all this technology, I think my impression is that patients have been a little bit left behind, whereas ours was the patient came first. But I think the downfall of nursing started when they got rid of Matron. Bring back Matron, you'll notice a difference in the hospitals.
Well, that's been very interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Pleasure.
So as we can see, nursing has changed considerably over the years. Thank you today for Jill for her insight, and on behalf of Thanet Writers, thank you for watching.